here is where I wanted the participants to open up, write, do, because the speaker is always engaging, and he would like to give all the type of solutions as far as possible, and to understanding more about EI, and also talking about the measurements of EI. Is measuring EI possible, and how do we measure EI? What are the scales, and what do we understand the psychometrics of it? So welcome Vijay. Vijay, although he has been all through now in India, right now he's joining us from France. So he gave me a heart throb until afternoon because I didn't hear from him. But then he responded to me and told 60 minutes back, I still have 60 minutes to join. Why are you just giving me this one, alarm? So I told, okay, fine, you're joining. I'm very happy. That's Vijay for you. And over to Sapna for introducing Vijay, and all yours, Vijay, for the next 60 minutes. Just tell us how should we measure, or are there any tools for measuring, and what everything you clear the blur around the psychometrics of measuring emotional intelligence. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you, Vijay. Sapna, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Sure. It will be an honor to welcome Mr. Vijay Pandey, who will take us through the different approaches to measure emotional intelligence and to what degree can they be assessed. Mr. Vijay is a postgraduate in psychology with specialization in HRD and HRM, having extensive experience in applying knowledge from psychology and statistics to business environment. He's an entrepreneur, an innovator, and a researcher with deep interest in studying, measuring, developing, and predicting human performance. He has worked in the area of psychometric test development, assessment centers, development centers, employee engagement, test validation, and localization, along with OD, training on psychometric test development, team development, employee surveys, and leadership assessments using 360-degree tools. Vijay Pandey has developed more than 100 tests since 2004, measuring aptitude, intelligence, knowledge, skill, personality traits, preferences, personality types, values, motivations, psychological needs, and behavioral competencies. He has also worked as a consultant for training test developers on how to write better items, as well as for psychometric test validation analysis and reporting for accreditation agencies like BPS, IIBP, bureaus, etc. Mr. Vijay has been conducting sessions and workshops on DDDM for leaders and HR analytics for mid-level HR professionals in medium to large organizations. He is also providing data analysis and sense making as a service to many clients. He has worked with 6 different clients so far, helping them to develop the desired software, that is, web application, backend process, and algorithms by serving as functional consultant. He is very well versed with programming concepts, some programming languages, PHP, Python, and databases, MySQL, which makes it easy to explain to programmer what to code for developing psychometric test platforms. His areas of specialization have been competency modeling, mapping, designing and conducting assessment centers, HR analytics, employee surveys. It is a pleasure for me and for all of us to welcome him. He runs team development workshops, contributes as psychologist in the interview panels for selection and promotion, and does consultancy in helping the organizations get desired business results by creating conducive culture. Yes, he also is with memberships on Life Member with National HRD Network India, member of National Academy of Psychology India. He is also visiting faculty on psychometrics OD and change in IIM Indore, TISS Hyderabad, and few more B schools. He is definitely a master facilitator on EI, accredited by Folia Emotions Institute, France. He's also a life member with National HRD Network India. It gives us all a pleasure to have Mr. Vijay Pandey with us, and he'll be guiding us and letting us know more on assessments of EI. Over to you, Mr. Vijay Pandey.
Thank you, Sapna. That was quite a long introduction. Thank you very much. Since Sapna already did a long introduction, I'm going to skip this slide, not to waste time any further. We will straight jump on to the topic or the problem of today that we are going to discuss. Now, one assertion and a request is that we are all co-travelers in this journey. So not that I'm going to present you something and you have to kind of, take it as it is, but I invite you to have a critical view of what is being presented and think along with me in this. The topic of emotional intelligence, it is not a kind of statement if I say that it is one of the most important skill. It is a known fact these days. So there is no question of opinion there whether it is important or not or how it is important. That debate is long been settled. And when World Economic Forum published its reports of future skills to look for, emotional intelligence for the first time appeared like 4 years back. It was on 8th number. Now it is on 4th number. So year by year, they think that it is more and getting more and more important. Another thing to understand about emotional intelligence that it has a very, very long past, but a very short history. Emotions have been us before the reasoning came. So it's like super long past. But people started talking systematically about emotional intelligence, especially in the Western world, somewhere around 1990. And by 1995, it was one of the popular word. And now by 2020, it is actually, all used, overused, abused, and misused word of business. So a lot happens in the name of emotional intelligence. And that is why the purpose of the session today is to get a clarity of what exactly we are talking about when we are talking about emotional intelligence and what exactly are we measuring when we are measuring emotional intelligence. So these are the two things which I would cover in the next 45 minutes. Okay. So what is EI? At definition level, it is very simple and clear. Its ability to understand and regulate emotions in self and others. So there are basically, four important components here to understand. One is understanding self, second is managing self or regulating self, and the third is understanding others, and fourth is managing or regulating others. So EI, as we know it, it's not one thing. It is essentially one, but in function, it's four. So it's like the Indian concept of God, which is essentially one, but then you have Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, which are essentially coming on the same Omkar. And at that level, at the manifestation level of it, which is always comes in understanding self, managing self, understanding others, and managing others, there is when you encounter emotional intelligence. At conceptual level, that it is an ability to understand and regulate emotion. You don't see it, you assume about it, or you infer it. So technically, it is called latent variable at that level. And understanding and managing self and others, it is called the observe or the manifest. So this is at definition level. Now, how different people have conceptualized EI? When I did the survey of this, all the EI tools in the world, there are more than 100, by the way, and there are more than 10 which are popular, and they are taken by more than a million people. So these tools can be put into three categories with regard to measurement. The first is that tools that measure emotional intelligence as an observable skill. So there is no opinion, no question of opinion there. There is no question of personal preference there. There is no question of tendency or proclivity there. It is a matter of whether you can do it or you cannot do it. So it's like any other intelligence test, right or wrong, good or bad, you achieved it or did not achieve it. So there is one conceptualization like that. Emotions or emotional intelligence as a skill. Then there is another conceptualization, which is emotional intelligence like any other personality trait. So there are many tools of emotional intelligence that measure it just like any other personality tool. For example, how self-aware I am. So rather than having an objective measure of my self-awareness, they ask me how self-aware I am on a scale of 5, and then it's like any other personality assessment. The third model, which I encountered few and which I think is the future of measuring emotional intelligence, is a mix of ability and personality both. And I will come later little in detail of this kind of model, because I think that these models are more comprehensive and they present emotion and emotional intelligence in the best possible manner. So let's look at the first model first. As Lucy was saying, that emotional intelligence is the term coined by Mayor, Salovey, and Caruso. Many people, actually some people, sometimes forget Caruso. Though the thing is that Caruso was the person who did most of the technical work. Mayor and Salovey were working together, and he joined in the party little late, but he joined in when they could not kind of kick it off properly in terms of analysis and technical. So when the first paper was published, it was published like that in the order of importance or how much time they spent on it. Later on, Caruso separated from them and his own model, and he has his own business now. So this model, remember the definition, its ability to understand and regulate. So it has 4 core pillars. One is perceiving emotion, another is using emotion, third is understanding emotion, and fourth is managing emotion. So when it talks about perceiving emotion, it is talking about understanding self. When it talks about using emotion, it is talking about managing self. When it talks about understanding emotion, it is understanding others. And fourth, when it talks about managing emotion, it talks about managing that relationship. Okay, so that's the fourth thing. It is totally skill-based model. So you perceive emotion through 2 different ways. One is through faces, by looking at face and looking at what is happening on the face. So they have done a lot of study to see that, whether it is the expression of emotional intelligence, is it acultural or is it cultural? So is happiness expressed the same way on the face by Europeans and by Indians? And I'm using Indians and Europeans as if it is one culture, but those who live in India, they know, like, in India there are no Indians. There are Punjabis, there are Bengalis, there are Gujaratis, there are Kannada, there are Tamilians. There is no Indian in India. In the same way, there is no European in Europe. There are French, there are German, there are other, and within France also there is, it's amazing to see the kind of thing that we as Indian from outside, we label France as one country and French as one kind of cultural unit, whereas it is not. It is very, very diverse. So there is this question was that, is emotion something which is expressed biologically on the face in the same manner across culture? And there has been a lot of debate on that. Now the debate seems to be settling that Yes, to a large degree. Majority of the cultures have the same way, across culture, the same way of expression of emotion. And the people who developed this test, Mayor and Salovey, what they did is that they took faces, and each face was associated with an emotion, picture of faces in different emotion. And then you are asked to identify emotion. If you can identify, it means that you have that ability. If you cannot, it means that you don't have. The more faces you identify, the better you have, the higher your ability you have. The less faces you identify, the less number of faces, less ability you have. So that was one. Second was identifying emotions in the picture. Means there are multiple people and there is something happening. You look at the picture and you identify which emotion is predominant in that situation. So this is the ability to perceive emotion. Then they talk about using emotion, facilitation and sensation. Like where in your body you feel the emotion, that's sensation. Facilitation, what was the antecedent of it, what all are clustered with that emotion. Then understanding emotion is which emotion go together and which emotion do not go together, how the blend part. And the change part is what happens when an emotion changes the degree. So anger, for example, is the middle degree emotion. Lower degree of it is annoyance and higher degree of it is rage. And in terms of social engagement management and emotional management, they gave situations and they asked you that what would be the reaction in that situation. So this is purely an ability based model in which the core focus is to know about emotional intelligence as skill. Now, since many people have some difficulty of working with ability test, because it's more kind of categorizing people, putting the people into boxes, putting people on the scale, and nobody likes it. Everybody uses it, nobody likes it. Even those who dislike it, they also put another category that I dislike it, and they follow the same thing. Yeah. So this is one model, ability. The second model was given by Baran and his colleagues. It is purely personality based model. In that, you have 5 broader dimensions of emotional intelligence, and then within each, you have 3 to 4 dimensions of like they're facets, not dimensions, they are facets. So, for example, first is self perception, in which you have self regard, self actualization, and emotional self awareness. Second, you have self expression, which is emotional expression, assertiveness, independence. Now, in this, for example, they are using the word emotional expression, but it is not the ability to express emotion, but it is your perceived ability to express emotion. So they are not measuring objectively whether in a situation which is anger inducing, are you capable of feeling that anger and expressing it properly. They're not measuring that. They're asking you, are you capable of expressing your anger? So it comes in form of a self-report, and therefore I categorized it in the form of all the personality-based measurement. This is how personality is measured, and there is good reason behind why it should be measured like that. But when it comes to measuring emotional intelligence, especially some abilities like expression, which is not a subjective thing. Expression, how good you express, is not evaluated by you, but by the others who see your expression. So you might be knowing that I am expressing my anger very well, but other people might not be seeing it in that way. And this happens a lot when I do coaching, and in that, when I encounter, there was one incident where like people laugh at me when I try to express anger. So I asked him, okay, express anger to me and show me how you express anger. So she was expressing anger like that. I said, no, that's not anger. He said, but I'm trying to hide my anger and I'm putting it differently. He said, no, people will see what you show to them. So if you want to express anger, express it the way anger is expressed by majority so that they can connect that you are angry. If you express anger like that, people will see either surprise or happiness. And no doubt they respond to you by laughing. So emotional expression, for example, as a skill is like that. As a personality measurement is that how aware are you with your expressions. And then there is, the depending upon your self-awareness, there could be different, let's say, variations of that. So it is like measuring personality. The third is interpersonal dimension, which is about interpersonal relationship, empathy, social responsibility. Again, it is measured exactly the way all other personality traits are measured. The decision making, problem solving, reality testing, impulse control. In that also, it could be it is possible to measure problem solving as a skill, as competence. But here in this test, in this model, it is measured as a personality trait. Stress management, same thing, flexibility, stress tolerance, and optimism. So this is the second kind of model for measuring emotional intelligence. It is more based on self-report, and which is where the rules of measurement are majority like all other personality trait related measurement. Now we have this third model. This third model is it is a late entrant, and because it is late entrant, it capitalizes on both. So it has one broader latent emotional intelligence, then four pillars of it, then emotional self-awareness, which is a personality kind of a trait, which is measured as a trait. It is basically asking the simple question, how self-aware are you? Or how self-aware do you think are you? Emotional literacy, which is a skill. Here, it is not like how emotionally literate are you. It is about giving you one emotion, let's say shame, and finding out the lower version of the emotion and the higher version of the emotion. Or let's say low intensity and high intensity of the emotion, say shame. Self-assuredness, it is again your subjective perception about to what extent you look for validation in others. The less unless you look for validation in others, the more self-assured you are. So it is a mix of ability plus personality. Managing self regulation, which is and a skill. The way it is measured is like a skill. Adaptability, optimism, and self-motivation, they are measured as personality trait. Understanding others, empathy, measured as personality traits. Recognizing emotion, measured as a skill. Analyzing emotion, measured as skill. Managing relation, assertiveness, collaboration, influence, and developing others. All are measured as personality traits. So this is Dick's model. So these are the three different kind of approaches for measuring emotional intelligence. Now, measuring of emotional intelligence becomes especially difficult and challenging because of these five problems or five inherent things. And here I would like you to you to kind of think critically and relate how many of them you have encountered in your work or while working with tools of emotional intelligence. The first problem is indicator versus indicated. So there is a very beautiful story about in Buddhism. It's the story is actually coming from the Vedic tradition, but it is captured by Buddhism art. So there was a disciple And the disciple went to the master and he said, "Teach me the truth." So the master pointed to the pointed his finger to the moon and see, "What do you see?" He said that, "I see moon." So master slapped the disciple. Ta! And then he said, "Idiot, you missed the finger. Now go and come tomorrow." The tomorrow again the disciple came and the master pointed the finger to the moon and asked, "What do you see?" He said, "I see the finger." Master again slapped. Tlak. And then he said, "You missed the moon. Go and come tomorrow." Tomorrow again the disciple came. Master again pointed out the finger and asked, "What do you see?" You see that, "I see the moon and I see the finger." The master again slapped. And then disciple asked, "What happened this time?" He said, "You missed me pointing out the finger towards the moon. So go and come again tomorrow." He came again. Next day, same story. "I see your finger pointing out the moon." Again a slap. And then he said, What happened this time?" He said, "You missed yourself. You see me pointing out the finger. So you are being an observer. You're not observing yourself. So this whole incident is happening inside you." The same problem is arising in emotional intelligence and measurement of emotional intelligence. What exactly are we measuring? Are we measuring the indicators, or are we really measuring the indicated? Are we really measuring the emotional intelligence as such, or the effect of the emotional intelligence? So that we need to be quite careful about what we are measuring. Second is what kind of measurement it is. Is it a direct measurement or indirect measurement? So, for example, many facets of emotional intelligence, like empathy, for example, majority of the time it is an indirect measurement, because you measure something in order to measure empathy. So what you are measuring is not empathy. What you are measuring is, maybe paraphrasing, what you are measuring is maybe the reciprocal feeling or the knowledge of that feeling, but it is not empathy as such. And then we need to be sure that the indirect measurement that we are doing has the least possibility of getting convoluted, getting mixed, getting corrupt with what we are really wanting to measure. The third is that how many facets can be observed and how many of them cannot be observed. So, for example, a person's knowledge of multiple emotions can be observed. A person's ability to categorize emotions properly in a group can be measured easily. But a person's level of self-assuredness, it's very difficult to measure. Even the person can tell you, and also what the person is telling you is dependent on his or her own level of self-awareness, because the person can tell you only what he already knows. So let's say if the level of self-assuredness is high but the level of self-knowledge is low, the score on self-assuredness will always be low, because the person doesn't know. And to illustrate this point, there is a very nice story in Sanskrit literature. There is a very often quoted story of Koop Manduk. Koop is the well and Manduk is the frog in a well. So when the frog is in the well, for that frog it is the world. It's only after the frog comes out of the well then it can see the world. So your, let's say, understanding or measurement of something like emotional intelligence would depend a lot upon the worldview, or let's say the expansion of the awareness of the person. So there has to be a minimum level of awareness before you can move on to anything else. And that's the reason why most people, when they take a test, or let's say a self-report for the first time, their scores are not reliable. It is just thrown. You should take it second time, third time, then you will, then it will become more reliable. So that observed versus legend. And then messenger versus the message. That's another problem with measuring the emotional intelligence, because what happens is that many of the emotional intelligence facets, they exist only in a relationship, in context of a relationship. Beyond that context of relationship, it is a story, it is a message, it is not the messenger. And our objective in while measuring, our objective is to understand the strength of the messenger. So some facets of emotional intelligence, like for example, ability to regulate emotion, that exists only in the context of a relationship. Otherwise, jungle mein mor nacha kisne dekha? The peacock danced in the woods. Who has seen? So we need to understand which of the facets are actually existing, are into the awareness of the person and can be reported as it is, and which are other facets which cannot be reported as it is. They can be understood and developed only in the context of a relationship. And that is why it is very much important that if you're working with emotional intelligence, it is way too much necessary to have a coach, a buddy, or a friend who can be your partner in terms of understanding yourself with regard to emotional intelligence. And so the entire spectrum of emotional intelligence cannot be captured by the test. And you should be very careful, especially for test scores, when they are talking about some facets of emotional intelligence which are existing only in the dyad, only in the relationship, and cannot really be captured only by the self-report or by skill. For example, one example I gave you is emotional regulation, and that is why as Murli was saying, is that knowing is one thing, but knowing doesn't change you. It's the doing which changes you. And many a times, what is measured by the emotional intelligence test is the knowing and not the doing. So that's the fourth challenge. The fifth one is, and this is where I have a big difference and big kind of fight with the people from NLP group when they talk about the unconscious and conscious. So the fifth thing is like this: in order to understand and use facets of emotional intelligence, you need to know, or you need to be aware of the fact that it is not a substance or a thing, but it is a process. So optimism is a process, empathy is a process, self-awareness is a process, emotional regulation is a process. So it's not a thing, and therefore there are certain things which are thing. For example, extroversion is a thing, it's not a process. It is something which is already there, which shapes your worldview. In the same way, like conscientiousness is a thing, means it's already a tendency which has developed up to a certain level, which shapes your way you will behave in day-to-day world. But for emotional intelligence, for many of the facets, they are not thing, they are process. And in that, you have to understand what is the existing level of ability, then how it is being used in, or how it is manifesting in day-to-day behavior, what are the functions that it is impacting. Many a times there are certain emotional intelligence factors which impact your reasoning, which impact your thinking, which impact your behavior, and then what is the likely outcome. And this is especially important if you are into the coaching business, or if you are basically helping other people develop their emotional intelligence, and your purpose is not only to measure. So these are the 5 challenges, and quite big ones, in measuring the EI. Now, given that, what could be what we could do as a practitioner, as a professional? So this is what I see the way forward in the in terms of measuring and using emotional intelligence for helping the people and the societies and the organization be better. First thing is to understand that it is not one thing but a constellation of 4 pillars and 14 facets. So when you work on emotional intelligence, everybody should have their own kind of, every client or every person who is willing to work on emotional intelligence, they need to first identify which of the facets that they need to work on, and that depends upon their purpose. So if my purpose is to improve relationship with my spouse, I will select different facet than if my purpose is to let's say be more assertive at my work, or if my purpose is to be more influential in my job as a leader. So we will select different facet. Second, mixed model is more promising than the purely ability based or purely personality based. In fact, I have seen most of the researches which indicate is that purely ability based model is used only in laboratories, and purely personality based model is used only for research. So generally for most consulting practice and work, what we call, is largely mixed model. So I would suggest to use that kind of model. And third thing is, measurement of EI cannot be acultural. Even if there are some evidences that there are things which are cross-cultural, like expression of basic emotions are cross-cultural, but the measurement of it or the expression of it is mainly cultural, and it is a lot is driven by or decided by or guided by the culture that you are in. So it is very much important for us to understand the cultural context of the person on who we are going to do the measurement, and then situate the measurement in that cultural context. Also, it also tells us that when we are selecting a tool or a test, it is very important to go through all the questions before buying the test. You ask the test developer, is that I want to take a test. Go through all the questions and look at them only from the perspective that, is this question understandable by the people that by the person that I'm going to test, or by the group of people that I'm going to test. If there are some questions which are not understandable, means which do not connect with that culture. For example, there are many questions, there are many things which do not connect across culturally, especially if you are asking things which are related to, for example, barbecue party does not concern. So if there is question about barbecue party and behavior related to that, that it is a very specific thing, even within the let's say what I call the third world countries like Europe, America and all. It is difficult to kind of connect, because Canadian people will connect very well with barbecue. Americans will connect, if they are in north, they will connect with south people, they don't connect much. Mexican will connect too much. Brazilian will connect very well, but people in Chile, they will not connect that much. So the cultural context is important. And a lot of manifestation of EI only in context of relationship. So what is more important is to kind of work on the measurement that you have, rather than do the measurement and leave it. So that's I see the way forward for emotional intelligence in terms of its measurement and to some extent its development. So that's all I wanted to kind of communicate here in this summit. I hope that it has given you an overview of what is there in emotional intelligence, in the name of emotional intelligence, what are the different things available, and which way we can go forward.
Thank you.
So that's
Thank you,
all.
Vijay.
And wow, we finished on time.
Yes,
So we have
absolutely.
15 minutes. Ask
Yeah.
me a question.
Yeah, I think we have a couple of questions which are there. Very interesting questions are there. First of all, I wanted you to, before even they ask the question, I wanted you to speak on your tool, which you have developed on the EI, and how it measures and things like. Just take 2 minutes to do it, and then we will come back with the questions, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please go ahead and speak on the tool. Yeah.
So this model that you see is a model which was developed by me and my team. It took us like 3 years to arrive at this model, and this was published for the first time in 2012. So this is the mixed model of emotional intelligence. These days in France, I'm also part of developing another model, which is especially focused on 7 competencies for leaders, which is largely a ability and competence based model. It has very few personality aspects. Personally, I still think that this model is more robust than the new model that I'm working on. But sometimes we need to work on, because other people who are in your team, they like little other things, and then you need to support them. So if you want, I can go ahead and kind of explain this model a little more in terms of how it is. But I think Lucy covered this very well because she spent quite some time. So that's why I quickly jumped from there. And I did not talk much about it, because I didn't want to kind of get the audience bored with the same kind of information coming again and again.
Yeah, and she did. I would like you to tell that how should one take the test, and maybe somehow you just give them in layman's perspective. Like, people are asking, okay, if I take my emotional test and my emotions vary at different points of time, so what will happen for that?
Okay, so I think I can do that by sharing a report and sharing a live case. Will that work?
Yeah, it can. Please.
Okay. So
while you're doing that,
pull out a report.
Yeah.
Yeah, while I'm doing that.
While you're doing that, I had another interesting question coming out by telling that, 1 second, I will just tell you. I think Nitya ma'am has asked that question. So Nitya ma'am, you wanted to unmute yourself and articulate that question better, because from you listening, it will be great for us than I reading out.
Yes, my question, Vijay, is that wherever we go and talk about SEL, this question always comes up, that there's so much of disparity in India amongst the children, and children from 2-tier towns, 3-tier towns. SEL will have to be different for them. It will have to be structured differently for urban children. Is that so? Would social emotional learning be the same for everybody? And what factors does the local context, how strong is that when you're implementing this, or yes, that's the question.
Yeah, I think it should be like the curriculum. The objective should be the same, because at one level it is same, but the curriculum should be widely different and let's say adapted to the cultural to the local context of the children, especially with regard to SEL, because the way we communicate in let's say a kind of urban or semi-urban environment, and the way we communicate in a rural environment is very different. And both like a person who is, let's say, very good communicator in let's say a gathering of uh, like debate society, like Miranda House type, that person could be a total failure while talking to a group of people sitting in a chai shop. So the curriculum should be very much matched with the cultural context or the local social context of the kids. But the overall objective should be the same, is that children should be able to identify different emotions, identify where it is in their body, where it is in their experience, how it originates, what are the triggers that originate it, and then how it goes through to the higher and lower limit. Like for example, when anger comes, it is never anger, it is only annoyance when it comes. But from annoyance it transforms into anger, from anger it transforms into rage, and then it goes into two direction. Either it goes outward and hits others, or it goes inwards and hits the self, and both are what we call is unhealthy manifestation of anger. So the process is same, but the way it happens in a rural context and the way it happens in an urban context is very different. So curriculum should be adapted to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hope that answers to your question, Nirja
Yes,
ma'am.
yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think tomorrow we'll be exploring more,
Thank you.
definitely, on SEL.
So I can maybe share the report.
Yeah.
We have 9 minutes. I would not
you
like
have
to take more
only
than 5
8
minutes.
minutes, Vijay. You have 8 minutes and 2 minutes is mine. So you have to do it.
Okay. So I will take exactly 5 minutes.
Go ahead.
So
go ahead.
this is a report. It's a very fresh report from, she's an HR head of a very famous company. I will not take the name of the company. I just gave her, she's my client. So I just gave her feedback just yesterday. So that's her 109. That's the overall EQ that I was talking about, that you have one overall EQ, and then there are 4 pillars. So her overall EQ is in the MET range. It means it is given in this part, score interpretation, and it says that this implies that she will largely be able to demonstrate satisfactory level of emotional adjustment and emotional competence in different situations. So that's what a mid-range of EQ means. Now, with regard to the 4 pillars, the understanding self pillar is quite strong, managing self pillar is quite strong, managing relationship pillar is strong, managing self pillar is in the medium range. It is still stronger than most people, but it is not as strong as other. And the same goes for this one, understanding others. And then there is just a description of that. Then we talked about these 14 facets. That I told, like, look at this and tell me about this lady, one particular, let's say, behavior pattern which will always come into her discussions or her teamwork. And I will tell you what I told her, and then her reaction on this. And there is no, like, there is no what I call is magic to that. It's science. Science in the sense that, the difference between science and not science is that in not science, who says is important. In science, what is being said is important. It doesn't matter who says it. In science, there is no authority. So a scientist is not an authority. A scientist is a student. In science, teacher is no authority. In science, the authority is the method. And then method itself can be evaluated by another method. In non-science, there is an authority. So Ved is an authority, or scriptures is an authority, or Bible is an authority. And for me, both science and non-science they are both, the same thing of, two faces of the same coin that we call world and experience. So it would be better. I'm not neither a scientist nor a non-scientist or a spiritualist. I love traveling into both domains and switching from one to another. Okay, so coming back to this one. You see, the assertiveness, collaboration, influence, and self-assuredness, both are very high. And analysis of emotions is clearly on the lower side. What it indicates that this person has a very strong desire to help other, be helpful, and most of the time she will be managing also to be really helpful, even if the people do not want to. So her whole problem of life is basically being overly helpful. And second, she knows many tricks and tools and techniques of what works, but she never knows why it works. So she has a strong kind of belief, and this is what I told you, that that this works, that works, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, but you don't know why it doesn't work. And you sometimes get that feeling that, yeah, it worked, but I'm not sure if it will work in the next time. And then she said, yeah, in fact, that's the thing I'm struggling with, is that I know it works, but I don't know why it works. And this is because her reasoning, emotional reasoning, is at quite low level. Then the second thing I asked from her colleagues, I say, like, does it happen to you that when she is behind you for your development, for your benefit, she will be so much behind you that you will start wondering, is it really for my benefit, or there is some benefit of hers involved in that? Why she is so much? And then her team, basically, because it was a group feedback, her team started laughing. He said, like, oh, that's so accurate about her. Madam jab piche pad jati hai to pad jati hai. And that happens when you have excessive level of collaboration and influence. Because then your innate desire is to be useful. And the moment you not doing anything which is not related to other people, helping, developing this and that, you find yourself as, not okay, not enough. So it is not actually a very healthy sign. So the high score always is not a healthy sign. And that's why when I give feedback on this test, I first say that there is no good or bad or desirable or undesirable score. Whatever you are, this score is the perfect symphony of that. And when you will change, then this constellation will change. So your purpose is not to kind of be high or be low on something. The purpose is to find a constellation which is most representative of you, which you want to be. Do you want to be a person who is perceived by other people as overly helpful but pain in the whatever part? Yeah. Very helpful but suffocating. A person who hugs with love but so much that you feel suffocated. So if you don't want to be like that, then you need to work on your assertiveness, collaboration, influence, and self-assuredness. And self-assuredness part is actually quite difficult to work on, because it basically says that I don't need validation from other. I don't need to hear from other people who I am. I know who I am. That's what high level of self-assuredness is. So this is a live case of how you use the information from different facets to understand what is happening to you in your life at emotional level and all the places where emotional intelligence plays. And then if your purpose is different from what is happening right now, if you want to go into a different direction, you know which dimension I need to work on. So for her, in order to get rid of the feeling that it works but I don't know why it works, she needs to work on this analysis of emotions. In order to not be over kind of helpful and at the end getting disappointed with people, she should work on these factors. The middle ones, they are not of importance for her purpose. If her purpose was related to that, okay, I don't have enough motivation in my life, and I wake up in the morning, I feel like dull and not doing anything, I ask myself, what is the purpose of all that? Then it's different.
Yes, Vijay, we are at 4:30.
So that's all from my side. I'll
yeah, thank you. And I think we have 2 tests, right? EQIP for professional and then one more, right?
Yeah, one EQIM, which is for leaders. Yeah.
Wow, EQIM for leaders and EQIP for professionals, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. It is always wonderful to listen to Vijay, and always you have to have deep conversations with him. And one-on-one is the best. I think you should catch up with him and have debates. I think he's the best debater. On any topic, he would go into the matters, into the deep roots and ask you and things like that. Doesn't mean that he's going to be arguing. There is a difference between argument and debating. I love debating with him always, and we had immense various debates. Thank you, Vijay, for joining and always enriching with your knowledge. And thank you so much. And this is a small appreciation for you for sharing your insights today in this VEI Summit.
Thank you.
Definitely. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, Vijay, I think, yes, your heart is also closer to Uttarakhand. I know that. So your tree is planted in Uttarakhand. A small gift from our sponsored gratitude partners, Digital Solutions, GAPS, to you. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for taking this session to us.